Pardon me for being a few minutes late. We had a late testimony we had to make sure we got put in. I'd like to call the committee, the Senate Transportation Committee, to order. I'd ask all in the audience as well as the committee, please stand and rise to the dash for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Patton.
Here.
Vice Chair Schaefer.
Here.
Ranking Member Antonio.
Here.
Senator Chavez.
Here.
Senator Reineke.
Here.
Senator Smith.
Here.
Senator Timken.
Here.
We will proceed as full committee. Members, please review the minutes from March 13th. Is there any objections or corrections to these minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Our first order of business, which this is the 8th hearing on Substitute Hospital 54. We're calling up Tom Rositas from the Howe Concrete. Morning, sir. Welcome to the committee. welcome back to the committee.
Good morning, Chairman Patton, Vice Chair Schaefer, Ranking Member Antonio, and members of the Senate Transportation Committee. I am Tom Rossitz, President and Executive Director of Ohio Concrete. As you know me from just a couple weeks ago, I am here to request that the committee reinstate the original language that the House included in substitute House Bill 54 regarding ODOT's pavement selection process. The recent changes may require the Advisory Council to review issues that are not relevant to both pavement material types. We prefer to maintain the original language from the 2003 process. I would also like to emphasize that the language does not remove any engineering considerations from the road construction process in Ohio, nor does it require the use of asphalt or concrete pavement. Instead, it simply calls for ODOT to review its current procedures and implement those improvements to ensure that the pavement selection comparisons are consistent and comparable. Concrete has long been known as a durable and minimal maintenance paving product. Its longevity, cost effectiveness have been biased by ODOT's designers for the last decade. As we focus on rebuilding and improving Ohio's roadways, it's crucial to prioritize long-term durability and the optimal use of tax dollars. This approach will promote a more balanced and effective selection process for pavement materials. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee, and I would be happy to answer any questions the committee members might have.
Thank you, sir. Are there questions for the witness? Seeing none, we thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Our next witness, John Esterly from the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen.
Morning, Chair. Chair Patton, Vice Chair Schaefer, Ranking Member Antonio, and members of the Ohio Senate Transportation Committee. My name is John Esterly, and I am the State Legislative Board Chairman for the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, a division of the Ohio Teamsters Rail Conference. Here today to discuss provisions included in the House-passed version of the transportation budget, specifically language and an allocation for Ohio to rejoin the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission, or MIPRIC. MIPRIC is a multi-state body that operates under the umbrella of the Midwest Council of State Governments, and like CSG, MIPRIC exists to coordinate interaction between Midwestern state officials, public and private sector at all levels, including federal, state, and local. MIPRIC was formed by compact agreement in 2000 and currently includes 8 of the 12 eligible states. Ohio is the only state east of the Chicago hub that is absent. Since 2021, MIPRIC has partnered with the Federal Railroad Administration to develop and implement the Midwest Regional Rail Plan, a long-term, multi-step vision for better service in MIPRIC's jurisdiction with new connections and increased frequencies on existing routes. MIPRIC facilitates communication between all the stakeholders involved in long-distance service. The Midwest Regional Rail Plan was developed with input from the DOTs of all 12 states in the MIPRIC jurisdiction, Amtrak, Class 1 railroads, metropolitan planning organizations, advocacy groups, and chambers of commerce. These entities continue to be included in the ongoing planning and decision-making. It should be noted that MIPRIC does not have any statutory control or authority over state-sponsored routes. For example, the Wolverine route from Detroit to Chicago is primarily governed by MDOT in Michigan with strategic support from INDOT and IDOT, and not by MIPRIC, even though all 3 states are members and fall within the jurisdiction. MIPRIC may work with states to ensure state-sponsored and long-distance routes meet in a meaningful way for travelers, but this is not a requirement. The language included in the House-passed version of the transportation budget does 2 things. First, it creates a mechanism in the revised code for the governor to appoint the 4 commissioners that would serve Ohio on MIPRIC, a commissioner from each chamber of our legislature, the governor or their designee, and a commissioner from the private sector. Second, the language provides an annual allocation of $25,000 to fund Ohio's membership in MIPRIC. Chair Patton and Senate Transportation Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions of the witness? Ranking Member Antonio.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for being here and for your testimony trying to clarify this, because I know many legislators have questions about this, even though this compact and joining it comes up every year when we have the budget usually. Can you talk a little bit about, was Ohio ever in the compact, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So Ohio was one of the founding members of the compact back in 2000, and our membership lapsed in the early 20-teens, 2012, 2013. I guess it should be, and I know this feels like splitting hairs, it should be noted that we really didn't pull out of the compact. We just stopped paying our dues, and then when the Sunset Committee reviewed it, it just got pulled out of the revised code. So we're looking again to rejoin. I think this is a great time for us to get back into MIPRIC because they are now, again, overseeing this Midwest Regional Rail Plan. So decisions are being made about train service in Ohio, whether we're at the table or not.
Follow up. So can you, what benefit? Because I think that's the other question. You have, I think, adequately answered the question of, do they have any kind of power greater than decision-making of the legislature? According to your testimony, no, they do not. But can you tell us then, what is the benefit? What would be the benefit of Ohio rejoining or paying our dues, however you want to put it?
Absolutely. First and foremost, if we look at existing routes, so the two that pass through the northern part of the state, including your district and the chair's district, we have the opportunity to advocate for better service throughout Ohio. When they're looking at timing for these routes that pass through Ohio, they're hearing from Illinois, they're hearing from Indiana, and they have no problem with it because those two states have daylight service. They don't get Ohio's voice at the table, so that's why we see the type of service that we have, particularly in Cleveland, where you're getting on a train at 2 in the morning, no matter which direction you're going. So when we look at things like increased frequency or potentially a timetable that would have alternate timings, we don't have a voice to advocate for ourselves. If we look big picture, as we're talking about potential passenger rail expansion in Ohio, we need to make sure that these new state-supported routes mate up with the existing long-distance routes in a meaningful way so that people can travel throughout the state and then beyond as needed.
Let's
Follow.
Thank you, Chair. I can attest to those late night, early morning routes through Cleveland because our daughter came in from Boston on passenger rail on Amtrak this last holiday season, and she also was delayed many times. So there's clearly work to be done with the sharing of the tracks, with talking about when those trains are available to passengers, especially in our communities. So I guess my question is, would you agree?
Through the chair, Senator, absolutely. We've got a lot of work to do, and we're talking not necessarily in the MIPRIC conversation about the extended or continued studies on passenger rail throughout Ohio. And that's a big part of it, is looking at how we can do this in a meaningful way while respecting the fluidity of the freight network and not impacting that. So this all kind of fits together, and MIPRIC is kind of the very first piece of the puzzle.
Senator, Ranking or Vice Chairman Schaefer.
Well, let's not use that one. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry about that. Thank you for your testimony. And going to the 30,000 or so foot level, little related topic, but a little different. Could you, and I'll be in full disclosure, I have a lot of skepticism about this whole passenger rail project and program in general, that it won't become a big financial boondoggle for the taxpayer, especially a general fund taxpayer. Why should Ohio even be involved in this situation, this compact, this organization? Because I've been dealing with this issue off and on for 15 years or more, and I've yet to see any numbers that would justify such a rail system, passenger rail system expansion in Ohio that won't become a big burden on the taxpayer.
Through the chair to the senator, so a lot of what we're talking about right now in Ohio in terms of passenger rail expansion is the very, very, very early steps of this planning process. And the hope is that when we get through, particularly the next step, which is the service design plan, we'll have a much clearer picture of what passenger rail in Ohio might look like. So at this point, we're not talking about service, we're not talking about capital investment. We just want to see a picture of what this could look like. If we look at other states, I like to cite the Borealis service, which is the most recent new Amtrak line. It runs from Chicago to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. With a very minimal investment, it has been revenue positive since, I believe, day 6. So it's, when you look at putting passenger rail where people will use it in a meaningful way, it can be a revenue generator, not, to your point, a boondoggle for the state.
Thank you. Senator Reineke. Okay, we're good. Senator Chavez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. So I'm sitting here struggling, if an organization is really trying to do good work and for the greater good, why are they charging such a big fee to participate?
Absolutely. So through the chair to the senator, I can't speak necessarily to why MIPRC charges the dollar amount that they do. They do have some administrative overhead. They host an annual meeting that their members and even members of the general public are invited to every year. So I'm sure a lot of what we would pay in terms of that annual fee is related to that and just being a part of the collective.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Senator Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. Is there an alternative member agency that's kind of involved in multi-state planning? Thanks very much.
Through the chair to the senator, in terms of specifically passenger rail, there really isn't. Again, MIPRC falls under that umbrella of the Midwest Council of State Governments. So that Council of State Governments does kind of the same thing, but in a more broad scope. But looking at the very granular level of passenger rail only, MIPRC is the organization that does it.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony today. Appreciate it. Our next witness is Mitch Radakovich from All Aboard Ohio. I'm going to surrender the chair to you. Just going to surrender the chair to you.
Chair Patton, Vice Chair Schaefer, Ranking Member Antonio, and members of the Ohio Senate Transportation Committee. My name is Mitch Radakovich. I'm a young professional from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm the board chair of All Aboard Ohio, the largest transportation advocacy organization in the state with over 50 years of history. Thank you so much for welcoming me here today. I speak on behalf of our more than 2,000 members from across the state to ask that this body fund Ohio's membership in the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission, otherwise known as MIPRC. MIPRC serves as a vital forum where Midwestern states can work together on funding, development, and operation of rail routes, connecting our region and ensuring that we have a voice in national rail discussions. I had the privilege of attending MIPRC's meeting last November in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I engaged with lawmakers, transportation administrators, and planners from states like Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Dakota, and Kansas. These states are making real progress in the development of their rail systems. Through these discussions, I gained insights that I have since shared with our membership and also with Ohio's local and state transportation partners, insights that are applicable to any of the proposed routes in our state. Now, unfortunately, while I was able to attend as an observer, Ohio was absent from the official discussions because we're no longer a member. When the Federal Railroad Administration spoke about projects in member states, Ohio's projects were not even mentioned. When Amtrak shared plans for a shared equipment strategies which would reduce costs for states like Ohio, Ohio was not a part of the conversation. Without a seat at the table, we risk missing critical funding opportunities and making costly missteps as we work through planning processes for potential future routes. Other partner states have enjoyed the benefits of membership. During this annual meeting, Republican Kansas State Senator Carolyn McGinn said that one of the best things Kansas has done was joining MIPRIC. At MIPRIC events, decisions are made that directly affect passenger rail service through Ohio. The Commission is responsible for developing and maintaining a strategic plan for passenger rail in the Midwest. In the current plan, Ohio only has one station with daylight service. That's Bryan, Ohio at 7:20 a.m., which really is only daylight service if you're a morning person. So, I don't know. By rejoining MIPRIC, though, we gain the opportunity to advocate for expanded daily and daytime service at no additional cost for Ohio. House Bill 54, the transportation budget in the House, with an amendment to reinstate MIPRIC, passed unanimously in both the House Transportation Committee and also on the House floor in the last week of February. The support from a wide portion of membership was bipartisan and quite exciting. Most notable were members who commented on how their views towards passenger rail have changed in the past 10 years. For instance, Vice Chair Daniels of the House Transportation Committee commented in the committee, 10 years ago, this was seen as a dead-on-arrival idea. It seemed illogical, and I felt the same way. But post-COVID, our lives are so much more mobile. With Wi-Fi and mobile phones, sitting on a train for a trip now makes sense, as you can use that time for productivity. When Ohio decided in 2013 to end membership in MIPRIC, or while Ohio decided in 2013 to end membership in MIPRIC, now, in 2025, we are in a new era of support and interest in transportation alternatives from many parties, including the Ohio Chamber of Commerce and many of the millions of Ohio residents who live near proposed and existing passenger rail corridors across the state. The cost of membership, just $25,000 per year, which is less than the cost of a slightly used Honda Accord. The return on investment will be immense, ensuring Ohio is plugged into federal and regional discussions that will shape the future of passenger rail. By including this language and rejoining MIPRIC, this body can position Ohio for a more connected, competitive, and forward-looking future. Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate Transportation Committee, thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Ranking Member Antonio.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for being here in your testimony. I'm not sure if you know this, but can you talk a little bit in the depth that you have the information available right now? Who is riding these passenger trains, especially post-COVID, especially right now? Because I keep thinking that some of the folks that would want, especially to go across some of the communities that the train travels through in the Midwest, are maybe retirees, maybe folks who really don't want to drive but want to get from point A to point B. Can you talk a little bit about who rides these trains?
Absolutely. And I'll talk both from the perspective of the tens of thousands of folks who do take these middle-of-the-night trains in Ohio right now, but also from states where they have proper service during the daytime. In Ohio, yes, it is absolutely retirees. We also have students accessing universities across the state. We have people from our population of nearly 20% of our major cities don't have access to a vehicle. But also, it's folks that are traveling for business. When you look at, we've been working with our friends in North Carolina and in Michigan, where they've been developing their state passenger rail services. In North Carolina, they started with only 3 routes per day, 3 trains per day. And because of the business demand going between Raleigh and Charlotte, they've increased to 5 now. So they're seeing new businesses come to their state, and those businesses are directly asking for more opportunities to get their people to different areas of the state. So I think the last piece I would say is, from talking to people across the state in my position, I have heard a huge variety of different stories. On our website, we even have a place where people can say, what would this do for you? And the variety of stories you hear, not only, like I said, college students, grandparents trying to get to their grandkids, cancer patients trying to get to their hospital for treatment, disabled veterans trying to get to the VA hospital, like everybody would benefit from this, like any demographic. Yes.
Thank you. One of the things that you talked about, and we also heard from Mr. Osterly, was the what's happening with the states that are part of the compact. And it occurs to me, if you're not at the table, we don't have a seat at the table in these discussions. Do you anticipate, should we join, how long do you believe it would be before we would see some kind of changes in Ohio once we if we sat back down at the table?
Through the chair to Senator Antonio, I cannot project a specific date that we would see the evidence, right? What I can say is even at this meeting back in November, they talked about the interstate passenger rail plan, and I was in the peanut gallery. I did not get a vote on the things that they were voting on. So the state of Indiana and the state of Michigan have more say in that interstate passenger rail plan than the state of Ohio does.
Senator Timken.
Thank you, Chairman. In your testimony, you said that without a seat at the table, we risk missing critical funding opportunities. Can you be more specific?
Yes, absolutely. Through the chair to Senator Timken. So the one that I'm specifically referring to here, we had a lengthy discussion with Amtrak about what's called the Midwest Shared Fleet. So there are other states that are a part of this which share the actual train cars. And so they share maintenance facilities, and because of that, they have much more flexibility. If you think about it, when you're at an airport and your plane isn't working, right? And so they have to go get a second plane, for instance, to fill in. If we are alone in that and we're not sharing cars, we could get left in a situation where we have to make some very expensive decisions. Versus if we're able to have a single dedicated maintenance crew, a single fleet that we can share with Michigan, with Indiana, with Illinois, with Wisconsin, then we save a tremendous amount of money in the long term.
Follow it.
Thank you, Chairman. And so joining this allows us to have that opportunity? I thought this was just an organization. I'm a little confused.
So through the chair, Senator Timken, joining this would have put us in that conversation, which we did not have a representative from the Ohio Rail Development Commission in that conversation. So while it is true that ORDC could reach out and make those advances, right now there are conversations which we are inherently not invited to because we are not in the commission.
Vice Chair Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, the mic works now. Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony and your expertise in this area. Again, like I asked the last witness, I'm going to be a hard sell on the passenger train concept. I'll just be upfront with you. I'm going to be a very hard sell because I'm looking at the economics. And I appreciate your anecdotal evidence and your opinions that you express in here with some decent backup to it. But I still am looking for, and maybe this is what we need to pay for, but I want to know what has changed since 15 years ago, 13, 14, 15 years ago, when ODOT brought the passenger train concept to us, particularly when we have and I won't say free marketplace experiment, but we had a marketplace experiment that some might argue failed, and that is Amtrak, because in the last 20 years, Amtrak has gone through cutting a number of routes and a number of stops because they couldn't make it. It was a huge drag on the federal taxpayer. So my concern is parallel. How do we make sure, do you have any data, do you have any studies, do you have something to show me that my people in the 20th Senate District aren't going to be paying sales taxes, income taxes, commercial activity taxes, all the other taxes in the general fund to underwrite somebody else's cheaper ride, under market value ride between the 3 C's and D, big D. I've got to be convinced of that before I can support this. You convince me of it, I'll support it. I'm all about high-tech things. There's a lot of my friends say big science projects. And this is a high-tech thing because I'm sure we'll have the highest tech technology running these trains and operating them, as long as we have a human operating them. I'm not into the autonomous stuff, particularly when you have people on board. But please convince us in financial terms that this won't be a boondoggle. I haven't seen it yet.
Through the chair to Senator Schaefer, I have a couple of comments which I'm excited to share with you. So first of all, last year, we worked with a group called Scioto Analysis, and we have a study published on the initial economic impact, which would come from the construction of specifically the 3C&D. We're seeing along the lines of $100 million of initial economic impact. We're seeing impact in the construction industry, impact in the hospitality industry, hundreds of new jobs brought to the state of Ohio. And that's just from construction, right? Once we look at other states, like I mentioned with North Carolina, you see secondary and tertiary benefits that also come. This is people, I live in Cincinnati, right? I'm an Ohio State Buckeye graduate. I would love to go to more Ohio State Buckeye games, but generally I decide not to because I don't want to deal with that 71 traffic and having to go around all the semi-trucks, right? So that is money that the city of Columbus is missing out on. So that's my first answer, and I'm happy to share that with everybody following. My second piece, though, is related to how is it actually going to impact your district, right? And we have over 300 businesses across the state of Ohio, like in all corners, not just along the corridors, which are directly doing business with Amtrak and which will benefit from different levels of increased passenger rail service. These are businesses going anywhere from literally creating the rail lines to making bearings that are going on the trains to making the seats. We have Siemens down in Cincinnati, for instance. There's hundreds of businesses, and I would be happy as well to point each of you to the businesses that are in your districts that will be benefiting. Lastly, I would say if we're talking about subsidized rides, there are lots of different services which Ohio has made the decision to pay a significant amount, even though you don't get direct revenue back. For instance, when I drove up here from Cincinnati, I took I-71 and I did not pay a toll to get here, right? I did buy breakfast this morning. So I made an economic impact. The state of Ohio and your constituents did benefit from me coming here on the highway, but I did not pay directly back to the highway. As Mr. Esterly shared, in the states of Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, they're already making revenue on the Borealis service, so that might even be a moot point. But my point is the secondary and tertiary economic impacts vastly outweigh the costs that would need to be made.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And correct me if I'm wrong, did I hear you say that the construction of this thing would be $100 million or more or something like that? And the point being that you got construction workers, you got product being bought and sold, transactions. Who is that the federal taxpayer paying for that, or is that the private sector paying for that $100 million plus construction project?
Through the chair to Senator Schaefer. So this would be a part of what is called the Corridor ID program, which is a federal program that was part of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. I also have some literature that I would be happy to share with everybody on what each of those steps are. When it comes to construction, that is a shared expense between the federal taxpayer and the state taxpayer. We also have seen in other states instances where we can get coalitions involved to make funding plans as well. We obviously will have our cities will be benefiting significantly as well for things like stations being built, et cetera. Obviously, there could be conversations there, and those are conversations which would only be able to happen if we fund phase 2 of the Corridor ID program.
Mr. Chairman? Follow-up. So my Fairfield County, Licking County, Perry County taxpayers are being paid to build this thing.
Through the chair to Senator Schaefer, your taxpayers would be paying a portion, as would all taxpayers in Ohio. I would also say one of the Corridor ID programs will have stops between Columbus and Pittsburgh in places like Coshocton and Steubenville. I know that might not directly be specifically in your district, but they could be relatively easily accessed by a number of your constituents.
Thanks.
Senator Chavez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to follow up on that, be careful what you say in committee because it'll spark some questions.
Right.
So you mentioned that this will impact all 4 corners of the state, and I was struggling to think of how passenger impact would be in southeastern Ohio. You mentioned Steubenville, which is the very upper part of my district, and it's not easy to get to from other parts of the district. So if you would, can you submit through the chair how this would impact the rest of Ohio?
Through the chair to Senator Chavez. Yes, and I love a good discussion, so I'm happy to get questions sparked. So actually, when it comes to southeastern Ohio and even southern Ohio as a whole, we actually believe that MIPRIC is especially applicable to Southern Ohio. And it's a little bit of a convoluted answer. Right now, the Cardinal service, which is an existing long-distance service, it actually runs along the Ohio River, but on the Kentucky side. But it provides multiple stations, which are directly accessible by bridge from Southern Ohio. And so actually, like when we present our map, we put that route and we put those stops at places like Portsmouth, and I know that's also outside of your district, but we put those stops to represent the fact that Ohioans are benefiting even from that Kentucky route. Now, when we talk about even counties and towns which will not directly have a stop from a train line in their area, the goal is to get the connectivity as close as possible. And that's where things like improving our highways will also be beneficial, where we can make sure that people can get to the stations as easily as possible and then be able to get to major cities even easier.
Thank you. That's great, but my district is mostly West Virginia, or it's all West Virginia and Pennsylvania, so Kentucky really doesn't help us either. So I'm looking forward to that information. Thank you.
Senator Stevens. Senator Smith.
It's all good, Mr. Chairman. So a lot of us are kind of, I think, and as we should, I mean, we're 33 senators from 33 different areas. We should look at how will this impact our district, or the folks who vote for us, but we also need to have a perspective, of a statewide perspective. I just want to give you a little bit of the details of my last 24 hours. I had something called Senate Transportation Committee yesterday morning. We were one floor above, and then I had a town hall meeting back in my district, and then I had Senate Transportation Committee today. Boy, would I have loved to have been on a train for all of those multiple commutes since I had to get back in my district. But here's the point that I want to bring up. Even if passenger rail just impacts the 3 Cs and D, I think it is wise for us to think about the amount of GDP that comes out of Cuyahoga, Hamilton, Franklin County. Let me read some research. Cuyahoga County had the largest GDP in the state of the 88 counties in 2019 at $88.7 billion. Franklin County had the second largest GDP at $86.5 billion. Again, this is pre-pandemic numbers. Hamilton County had the third largest at $67 billion. So the combined GDP of those 3 counties was 40% of the state's total. So I think we need to be mindful that the notion that if there are some programs that might directly impact the major population centers of the state, the amount of economic activity that comes out of 3 of those 88 counties is significant to all of what we are trying to do. That being said, do you think that, again, as we are just thinking about passenger rail, how this could positively, is there any research that indicates the addition of passenger rail has increased GDP? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Smith.
Through the chair, to Senator Smith, I'll be happy to get you specific research likely from other states, I will tell you. One example that I look forward to sharing with you is an economic impact analysis. So not just a study, right, but it's an analysis from the state of Missouri, who has had for many years now state-supported passenger rail service between St. Louis and Kansas City. Now, for those of us familiar with Missouri, there's a lot more of Missouri aside from just that line between those 2 cities. What I will say is, as a result of that study, which again I look forward to sharing, they have increased funding for passenger rail, and they're equally as fiscally responsible General Assemblies for multiple budgets in a row.
Just a few questions. First of all, a little bit more about All Aboard Ohio. Tell me more about your organization and how big is it? How many members? Are your members just dues-paying members? Are there people that just like to be involved in railroad? What is the structure of your organization?
Yes, Chair Patton. So All Aboard Ohio is, like I said, Ohio's oldest transportation advocacy organization. We've been around for 53 years. We have members across the state, both paying members and general membership as well. We have chapters which meet across the state in Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, in Toledo right now, and we're also working on ones in Canton and Sandusky, so stay tuned. And we serve a couple of different purposes. The first is to serve as the glue between the hundreds of different interested parties across the state. So we have our coalition, which we bring together to share a variety of perspectives. Just last week, we had our advocacy day here at the State House, where we had folks from different cities across the state, different metropolitan planning organizations, chambers of commerce, et cetera. Even we had a representative from the business community down in Hamilton, somebody from First Financial. So All Aboard Ohio serves as a place for all of those groups to come together. Yes, there are also people who generally are just passionate about transportation, and we're also happy to have them be in our fold. And at the end of the day, we're just pushing to not only get trains, but to see Ohio grow to its full potential.
Thank you. How many full-time employees are employed at All Aboard Ohio?
Chair Patton, we have no full-time employees. We have 2 very part-time employees, and then the rest is completely volunteer. For instance, I'm here as a volunteer. I have a call right after this for my big boy job, and I'm thankful that I'm able to be here. So.
Okay, I'm just going to run by a few things from, touch on Vice Chairman Schaefer's memory of when we had first looked at the 3 C&D. Federal government was going to give us about $400 million. That was, it seemed really good at the time. But it was also going to come with a $150 cost to subsidize that. And when we looked at where the money was going to come from, it was going to have to come from our buses. And so the question or the challenge that I think we looked at that time was how many people will ride the trains as compared to how many students, elderly people going to the doctor, et cetera, are going to use the buses. And, you know, I'm sure, I think we're going to hear from some bus folks even this morning. The challenge then was, you know, you had to pick. And the other challenge, as I recall, for my colleagues and I from Cuyahoga County, the train that was going to leave Cleveland was leaving about 6:10 in the morning, which would have led somebody like me, and I imagine my colleagues, to get a ride downtown or park and ride your car and get into Columbus about 10:30, then have to get an Uber or a cab to get over here with your luggage to the State House. And then the day we're going to leave, if we didn't get back to the same train station by 2:30, we'd have to stay no whole of the day. So someone like, you know, that works in Columbus from Cleveland, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And our further studies showed that where you mentioned eastern states that have, you know, much greater use, you find cities like Philadelphia and New York, even Boston, that are what they call driving difficult and parking impossible. Whereas I don't think that we as the state of Ohio can compare to those states because of the fact that we have such a broad interstate system, as this Transportation Committee is well aware. So I'm just wondering, you know, what, and the biggest difficulty I think we were faced with back then is that the 3 C&D was going to share the rail lines with Norfolk Southern and CSX at an average speed of about 23 miles an hour. So the question is this: what's changed?
Excellent. Chair Patton, happy to answer all of those concerns. So first, in terms of taking money from the buses, addressing that, we think that, you know, All Aboard Ohio believes in a variety of transportation options. We do believe once you make it to the station in Cleveland, you need to get to Grandma's house at the end of the day. You're not going to just spend your vacation at the Amtrak station. So it is important for there to be transportation options to get people there. And so we would encourage the General Assembly, ideally, to fund both. I know that's a difficult ask. The next thing I'd say, when you talk about parking difficult, parking difficult cities versus parking, you know, available, abundant cities.
Driving difficult, parking impossible.
Yes, okay, yes. Driving difficult, parking impossible. Driving was very easy for me this morning, I will admit. What I will say is driving is also very easy in Charlotte, North Carolina, in Detroit, Michigan, and those are 2 places, like I said earlier, where we are seeing record ridership. And in fact, we're actually seeing record ridership nationwide. The Amtrak system last year had record ridership. When you talk also about, there was a third piece, I apologize.
That's all right, you're doing fine.
Okay. But yeah, when comparing it to last time, essentially, the timing and,
Norfolk Southern, the rail line?
Yes,
the
okay,
speed.
absolutely.
The 23-mile-an-hour speed when you're behind a long coal train.
Yes, sir. So Chair Patton, we, as a part of this phase 2 of the study of the Corridor ID program, a part of this, it's called the Service Development Plan. And so it's directly taking into account where Norfolk Southern or CSX, which the current proposed 3C and D route, for instance, would use both of those. It's taking into account where their operations are would be significantly encumbering Amtrak service, for instance. And we look at ways that we might be able to improve those areas. There's a couple of different things. One example is called double tracking, which is when you have literally 2 tracks that are side by side with each other. The Amtrak train, which would be going potentially up to 80 miles an hour or even faster, could go on that second track to bypass the freight rail train. That's one example. Another example that we see actually on that Borealis service up in Wisconsin, they were seeing issues where there was congestion at a yard just south of Milwaukee. And this was a yard that was owned by Freight Railroad, and as a part of the construction of the Borealis service, they created a bypass line in that yard, which not only benefits the Amtrak riders, but also benefits the freight railroads and helps them to increase their throughput in general from that yard. So again, talking about secondary economic benefit, we see that as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Is there any other questions? Vice Chair Schaefer.
To have a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. And by the way, you're getting some tough questions, and you're doing a great job. You say Charlotte and what other city in the south was, and Detroit in the north, are having a great experience with this. Then I would hope, are those government-run systems as well?
Through the chair to Senator Schaefer, yes. So both North Carolina's and Michigan's are a part of what is called these state-supported routes, which is what the 3C and D would be. Okay. In both of those cases, the federal Amtrak service is involved. They're slightly different operations, which I would be happy to give you additional details offline.
Mr. Chairman?
Follow up.
Thank you. Then I would hope that we could get total financial reports, and I don't mean for every screw and bolt that they've bought, but a total CPA reviewed or audited report of their income and expense history, correct? So we can see how much government money has gone in and how much private money has gone in, how much they're paying in salary, all the key expenses. That would alleviate a lot of our concerns, I think, if we could see that those 2 systems, or maybe other systems you know of, that your organization is saying are great examples to look to. Well, let's look to their finances. I mean, I would love to see those finances, and that's not a sarcastic comment. I would truly love, to be convinced, I would love to see that so that the taxpayer is not holding the bag for somebody else's ease of travel at 23 miles an hour throughout Ohio.
Through the chair to Senator Schaefer, we absolutely can work with our friends in Michigan and in North Carolina and in some other successful states to get those, as well as the Missouri GDP study that I'll share. The last thing I'll share on that front, though, today on our website, we will be dropping, and we'll also email it to you, a study which we have commissioned on how 4 other states across the U.S. have financed their state-supported passenger rail routes. And so I think that will be very insightful as well.
Okay. One last comment, Mr. Chairman. You know, here's an idea you might try. Again, this would help convince me to support it. A lot of expansion sports teams will sell season tickets ahead of time, ever before the stadium is built, before the team is assembled, before they've drafted anybody. And so if you come to the table showing you've got X number of Ohioans, committed with a credit card to a season ticket scenario similar to the sports franchises, I think that's another confidence builder, because that shows that there's going to be not just promises, but people are putting their money on the table. I don't know if that's possible or even legal for a government entity to do, but it might be food for thought. Thank you, Chairman.
And Senator Antonio.
Thank you. This 23 miles an hour keeps coming up. Can you say a little bit about what that average train speed is? Is it really 23 miles an hour?
Through the chair, first to Senator Schaefer and then to Senator Antonio. For Senator Schaefer, I'm not necessarily sure about the legal feasibility of this season tickets. However, what we are working on at All Aboard Ohio with our members all across the state is getting as many small businesses and as many citizens to sign on as possible. And we look forward to showing back up to the General Assembly with a list of hundreds of businesses And we already know, as the Ohio Chamber of Commerce has endorsed moving forward with Phase 2 of the Corridor ID program, we know that there are thousands of businesses across Ohio that are passionate about this. Through the chair to Senator Antonio, yeah, the 23 mile per hour, I know I have never quoted that, and it may have been a part of that study from 15 years ago, and I'd be happy to look that up and confirm. What I know is the quoted speed to start would be 79 miles per hour, with the highest potential, if we are continuing to operate on freight railroads, would be up to 110 miles an hour. So I hope for everybody here that is faster than driving. Yes.
If you could provide the data that shows a freight train route, CSX Norfolk Southern, that if they're going, that they have to go 79 before you can go 79, or they have to go 110 before, so can you clarify that? Because that seems much extreme than it was 15 years ago, and we're happy to get that information. If we get it to the chair, I'll make sure we distribute to members of the committee.
Chair Patton, if I could really quick, we can definitely work on some information with those studies. What I also will be pointing you all towards is current service in Illinois and in Michigan, which do still operate on freight rail lines. In Illinois now, you can get between Chicago and St. Louis faster than driving, and they hit 110 miles an hour on multiple points along that route. And then the same in Michigan. I will put the caveat in Michigan as a portion of that 110 is on state-owned rail line.
See no further questions. Thank you very much for all your hard work today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate your ride back to Cincinnati. Our next witness is Mary Logan So from the Ohio Contractors Association. Good morning. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning. Chair Patton, Vice Chair Schaefer, Ranking Member Antonio, and members of the Transportation Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the issue of abandoned lines. My name is Mary Logan So, and I am Vice President of Safety and Employee Development for the George J. Eigel and Company, Incorporated. Eigel is a heavy civil contractor located in Columbus, Ohio since 1911. The potential risk related to utilities is one of the greatest safety issues facing contractors today. I've worked in construction safety for more than 20 years. I currently represent Ohio contractors on the Ohio 811 board, am an active participant on the Ohio Utilities Damage Prevention Coalition, and co-chair the Abandoned Line Subcommittee there. Let me provide some examples of what we've encountered to put this in context for you. Less than a mile from here, Eigel worked on a roadway job when a pipe crew struck a 4-inch unmarked gas line. We followed best practices and called in the damage to Ohio 811. Upon responding to the damage, Eigel was informed that they had hit an abandoned line. We were directed to continue, but as it turns out, the information wasn't accurate. While the 4-inch was abandoned, another unmarked 2-inch gas line had been fed through the old 4-inch line that was abandoned. In another example, we were a contractor in a central Ohio suburb, widening a road, building a park, and a walking bridge for students to access the shopping area nearby. The project was regularly marked by utility locators. The locator was performing straight line marking of what was on the drawings, but unknown to Eigel, gas relocations had taken place, so the new utilities were not getting marked at all. The locators didn't even have the correct drawings. So Eigel vacuum excavated and protected what ultimately turned out to be an abandoned line for nearly a year. To ensure we knew its location, we had a survey crew come out and took GPS points to note its location. We distributed the information and updated our drawings to avoid damages. This should not have been necessary. Given all of these precautions, we were shocked when we hit an unmarked gas line in the intersection just beyond the driveway to the school campus. If it hadn't been spring break, the emergency response would have led to preventing access to the campus or the need to evacuate all staff and students on campus. In another example, Eigel was excavating to build a parking garage on Front Street in downtown Columbus when an operator hit an unmarked 2-inch gas line. I remember the phone call on our incident line at the office from a panicked superintendent and ultimately the decision to call 911. It was rush hour and Friday in downtown Columbus. First responders shut down the roads nearby and rerouted traffic. It turned out that the 2-inch abandoned line was being fed from a 16-inch main. Gas blew for over 4 hours. One of the contractors performing the repair told us that the line would risk 4 city blocks had they not been able to get it safely under control. Our crew performed a pre-dig at the airport and uncovered an unmarked 4-inch steel gas line just outside the fence line on the south side of International Gateway. Again, we called Ohio 811 to have facility owners come on site and confirm ownership, and nobody claimed it. In fact, we were told it was likely abandoned, but in conflict with the work, we were instructed to just go through it. The assumed facility owner refused to tap the line and ensure that it was safe. We refused to tap the line because we don't have the experience to do that. Work in this area was delayed a month before EIGL paid a third party to have it tapped at our own expense while being berated for causing delays. It immediately began blowing and had to be sleeved for safely just within distance of the runways here in Columbus. Later, we learned that it was residual gas that blew, but it was enough gas that could have injured the crew. Had a less confident superintendent faced the same problem, who knows what the outcome may have been. And it's not just with a bucket. An EIGL concrete crew was performing tunnel repairs on a university campus. We had a valid locate ticket, the proper notifications had been made, so imagine the unsuspecting concrete crew in a darkened tunnel jackhammering. They reported a sound like a microwave exploding. They ran out of the tunnel, confused to see students and staff streaming out of buildings. The employee jackhammering kept complaining about pain in his shoulder. They stripped him of his shirt, and they could see nothing. He didn't feel well, and we took him to the hospital. And as more information came to light, we discovered that he jackhammered into an unmarked 13,200 electric line, shutting down power to 4 campus buildings and sending an electric shock circulating throughout his body. The doctors told us that the rubber handles and the jackhammer likely saved his life. When I sat in a trailer the next day taking witness statements of the rest of the crew who worked in that tunnel, their voices shook. One employee cried because the injured employee had just taken over for him, and he kept saying it should have been me. And yet another example, not unlike what you'd hear from any contractor who works in this state, a pipe crew was working on another university job. On an unrelated project, another contractor was abandoning gas lines on behalf of a facility owner. We could see them do the work. EIGL crews literally had to wait because a 4-foot section of the 8-inch steel abandoned facility had to be removed for the installation of a manhole on the university project. 2 weeks after abandonment, EIGL was told by the facility owner that it was safe to remove the portion in conflict with the job. The line, still in the ground, was cut and capped with a boot on both ends. After receiving both verbal and written confirmation that the line had been purged and abandoned, an EIGL foreman entered the trench, took a partner saw, and made a cut through the line. On the second cut, the building pressure literally shot fire out one end of the facility, and 2 nearby employees had to dive into a trench to avoid injury. We were lucky. Again. But here's the thing, I am not a believer in luck because luck runs out. Other contractors might not have the resources to be as fortunate, and lives are ultimately at risk. There are humans in all of these stories. I'll tell you that we have 36 more stories that we argued over which to tell, and I have plenty of superintendents who did not appreciate the fact that theirs got cut, but I think this representative sample is more than just EIGL. It's every contractor who works and lives here in the state of Ohio. Our employees live, work, and raise kids here. Legislation for abandoned facilities is not cutting edge, and there are many, many issues facing how to mindfully move forward toward a safer excavation process in Ohio. Trying to maintain records of abandonment, create safe practices to purge utilities properly and safely, prevent abandoned facilities from being used as conduits to new installations, exchange information on how to safely confirm if a utility is live or dead, are not issues we can resolve quickly. It requires commitment. I have co-chaired the Abandoned Line Subcommittee for the Ohio Utilities Damage Prevention Coalition since its inception in September 2018. And it was no small task to get stakeholders to the table. We struggle today to get some stakeholders to even attend or send the right representative in the ultimate decision maker. We have tried to weigh safety, cost, schedule, and productivity. We've evaluated language from other states, and we continue to meet today. I understand all too well that if we cannot set aside our own personal agendas, we're going to kill someone. It is my every hope that House Bill 54 causes the decision makers with each stakeholder to come to the table so we can make construction projects safer for the employees, the motoring public, and those who call Ohio home. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there questions of the witness? Ranking Member Antonio.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony. And to be clear, what we're talking about is the portion in, I think, the portion in the budget that directly addresses being at the table, participating in this, is it a commission? Coalition, I think. Tell us, I think, this panel today, why the participation, being at the table, would make a difference in some, and prevent some of the stories that you've just told us about. How does the connection get made?
Through the chair, Senator Antonio, I think the most important part here is that when you take a look at the coalition dynamics, contractors are by far the minority of the speaking public there. Now, utility companies are also contractors. They're also putting in utilities too. They have people at risk. And my concern is that working through the coalition, the goal is to get the right people to the table so we can have meaningful dialogue and come up with a solution forward. Without having enough stick, we can't seem to make any progress. And the goal is to ultimately trying to get people to understand that this is more than a financial issue. This is a safety issue. And from my standpoint, that's the part I'm paying the most attention to because I'm the one working with the people who are putting this in the ground and trying to determine as they find a utility, is this live, is this dead? Do we proceed? Do we not proceed? Being at the table, I think, is incredibly important if we can get the stakeholders who have the right power and authority to do something about it.
Follow-up, thank you. So it's not just who's at the table, but also that the person that's sent has some authority, has the ability to make those decisions? Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Through the chair, Senator Antonio, absolutely, because ultimately there are a lot of big players who are participating at the table, but when you're talking to someone who has no decision-making authority for the company, we're just circling in the same conversation over and over again without the data and the statistics to propel it forward and enough momentum to get the right people there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Chavez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree that this is a complicated issue that doesn't need to be solved in the transportation budget. It needs to be solved elsewhere. Are you familiar with the Senate version of the transportation budget?
Through the chair, Senator Chavez, I am a little bit familiar. I am less familiar with the language of the Senate bill, knowing just the parts that were stricken.
Oh, I'm just curious, just curious if the Senate version addresses your concerns or aggravates them.
Through the chair to the senator, oh, that's a very complicated question. This is something I've been a part of working on for a very long time. When I first saw the language come about, I was surprised because I didn't know anything about it. And there are a lot of ways that we can solve this problem, but I also think that if we don't really be mindful of the language and specifically what it means for if it's going to be abandoned place, if it's going to be keeping records, who's going to have the authority to do that, how are you going to be able to tell a contractor to proceed or not proceed, that we have to think through all of those scenarios and make sure that the language is in the benefit of all of the participants and the stakeholders involved.
We're good.
I just don't know if we're on the right track or not. So your stories were compelling, but we need to know if we're going in the right direction.
Through the chair, Senator Chavez, I think this is absolutely in the right direction because I can tell you from the moment the language hit the streets, suddenly my phone started ringing. Suddenly people would take the call again because now we want to talk about, well, what can we do? Because quite frankly, I think when you look at it through the lens of one contractor, if you think of it just one stakeholder, there's a lot to like. And I have to also consider all of the facts when I'm talking to facility owners and I'm talking to those on the other side and the locators of how we're going to do this productively. I want to make sure that those voices are also heard so that we're examining the issue pretty comprehensively since we were only looking at it in those Senate bills related to ODOT right-of-way specifically.
Well, thank you for your insightful testimony today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next witness is Casey Blazer with Central Ohio Transit Authority.
Good morning, Chairman Patton,
Sorry,
Vice.
wait.
Oh, yeah.
Just,
Absolutely.
so just to clarify, what the testimony that we just heard with the language, that was, my understanding, House Bill 54 language that came over to us from the House. We've just checked, and indeed, that language was removed by the Senate sub-bill. So just so we're on the same page. Okay, thank you.
Good
Yeah,
morning.
good morning,
Welcome to the committee.
Chairman Patton, Vice Chair Schaefer, Ranking Member Antonio, and members of the committee. Thank you for your time today. Forgive me for my voice. I have a son in daycare, and I'm recovering from my monthly cold. So at CODA, we act as an extension of the region's economic development arm. We daily provide access to jobs, healthcare, and education to our customers. We believe that public transit is a tool for workforce development and upward economic mobility. We also know that the Columbus region is expected to grow by 1 million people by 2050. With that knowledge and the other growth throughout the state, the reinstatement of the Ohio Workforce Mobility Partnership Program is even more important. This program provides essential funding across the state that helps transit agencies address the unique workforce transportation challenges within our communities. CODA has been the grateful beneficiary of these grant funds during the past biennium. We received dollars to construct our mobility center at Rickenbacker, complete workforce transportation analysis, enhance transit stop amenities near major employment centers, and coming this May, the restoration of late night service, an essential need for our shift workers. And I want to quickly go back to our mobility center at Rickenbacker. Located less than 2 miles from the Rickenbacker Airport, this innovative mobility center will provide greater access to public transit, allowing for critical workforce connections from various regional transit shuttles like the Groveport Rickenbacker Employee Access Shuttle or GREAT Shuttle, and then other transit services within surrounding counties. So projects like this are happening across the state because of dollars from this Ohio Workforce Mobility Partnership Program. And I will say with that current location, our current connection with CODA and to other surrounding transit services is within a gas station. So that's not an ideal situation for everybody. So with these dollars helping us build this mobility center, it's truly a quality of life center. We're partnering with the Mid-Ohio Food Collective. There'll be food lockers there so that not only workers in that main logistics hub, and as you all know, Andrel will be just in that area, they'll be able to make those transportations from wherever they're coming, whether that's from CODA Fixed Route to CODA Fixed Route, from our rural partners. They can get food on their way home and their other needs. So as Ohio continues to attract historic investment in our state, we must ensure our transit providers are able to meet the needs of these growing workforce. We know that these job announcements are so important and so essential. However, without the workforce able to get to these jobs, these announcements are really just buildings in our state. And we know that this program helps us make those connections that are so important. So thank you for your time, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions of the witness? Seeing none, we thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Our next witness is Andy Volinick from the Delaware County Transit. Good morning. Welcome to the committee, Andy.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Chairman Patton, Vice Chair Schaefer, Ranking Member Antonio, and members of the Senate Transportation Committee. Again, my name is Andy Volinick, and I'm the Executive Director for Delaware County Transit, the mobility options provider for one of the fastest growing counties in Ohio. I'm here to advocate for the reinstatement of the $15 million per year for the Ohio Workforce Mobility Partnership Program within the substitution bill. DCT has benefited directly from this funding source with a pending workforce transportation study, which will be concluding here the RFP process this month. By allowing federal flex dollars to fund the OWMPP, agencies like DCT can take their transportation plans and then put them into action, providing effective and efficient focused workforce transportation. As you're all too well aware, frontline positions have always been a challenge to fill, But ever since 2020, restaurants, retail centers, distribution, and our ever-impressive modern-day manufacturing centers struggle to not only recruit, but retain talent. In my discussions with Delaware's economic and workforce development personnel, one of the largest barriers to accessing these jobs is transportation. General public transportation can help with this. Nearly 30% of DCT's ridership within the city of Delaware is for work. We see people from all lines of work use our core service. Daycare teachers to middle school teachers, mechanics, hotel workers, retail associates, and the list goes on. However, this is a concentration of service. The harder challenge is how do we get people from rural portions of Delaware County? Our northern portion is still very rural, to frontline positions. How do we serve tertiary workers wanting to get into the urban centers like Columbus? How can we foster innovative partnerships between CODA and Licking County Transit and ensure we serve those major economic centers with services that work for the workers? The continued funding of the OWMPP will empower Ohio's transportation providers to solve these riddles and deliver a focused and effective service for workers. We strongly seek your support for this change to the substitution bill, and I thank you for your service to Ohio for the time to provide my proponent's testimony. With that, I'm open to any questions, comments, or concerns. Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony this morning. Are there questions to the witness? You know, I think we all agree that it's imperative, you know, that we get folks, especially these upcoming projects we're coming. So I think we're going to continue to do everything we can to work with you in a partnership to make sure we get that done. See no further questions. Thank you again for your testimony this morning.
Thank you, Chair.
Our next witness is Jared Hampshire from the Akron Metro. Morning, Mr. Hampshire.
Morning. Chair Patton, Vice Chair Schaefer, Ranking Member Antonio, and members of the Senate Transportation Committee, again, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony. My theme here is going to be much the same as my previous colleagues, only from a different area of the state as to the importance of the Ohio Workforce Mobility Program. I currently serve as the Chief Operating Officer for the Metro Regional Transit Authority in Akron, serving Summit County. However, my transit career began 20 years ago right here in Columbus as a student bus operator for the Ohio State University. Across the state, public transportation supports over 100 million trips annually, contributing to local economies, enhancing community connections. In Summit County, we provided 5 million of those trips in 2024, serving riders for many reasons, but one thing remains clear, that every trip has value. One of our fastest growing demographics includes students from the University of Akron and the Akron Public Schools Career and College Academy who rely on our services for workforce development opportunities, including getting to school, work, internships, and mentorships. Governor DeWine's budget emphasizes Ohio's technology-driven economy, workforce development, and support for seniors, families, and children. Public transit is a key tool to advance these goals by ensuring Ohioans can fully participate in our state's economy. Transit is not just an urban or rural issue, it's a statewide priority for job creation, workforce development, providing independence for individuals with disabilities, and allowing seniors to remain in their homes. When done right, infrastructure doesn't just move people, it fuels economic development, strengthens local businesses, and ensures that Ohio remains competitive for years to come. Specifically, the ask today, looking to reinstate the $15 million per year in the Workforce Mobility Program through federal flex funding. As intended in the House version of the bill, the program provides funding for agencies to support a lot of what I've already mentioned in testimonies and the two previous testimonies you've heard before. For Metro specifically, it allowed us to purchase enhanced dispatching software and also some of those transit waiting environments that were previously mentioned. Senator Patton, as you mentioned before, when we heard from our rail colleagues that waiting at the end of the bus line or the train line, that should be a pleasant experience for everybody. It shouldn't just be a pole with a metal sign out in the cold, right? So that allows us to invest in things like that to make sure those people that rely on our services have a pleasant waiting area and a safe waiting area to get on our services. I would also like to thank the committee for removing language that requires policing of a transit hub. Cleveland and Akron already have a large safety and security presence in the form of our transit police departments. While others have contractual relationships with local law enforcement agencies that already aid in safety and security of our systems. Thank you for your past leadership and support, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take those questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions of the witness? Seeing none, we thank you and thank you for your patience this morning.
Well, thank you.
Our next witness, and you'll find her testimony bottom of your iPads below some of the written testimony, will be Mary Habig from the North Central Area Transit. Good morning and welcome to the committee.
Chairman Patton, Vice Chair Schuster Schaefer, Ranking Member Senator Antonio, and members of the Senate Transportation Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. My name is Mary Habig. I am the Executive Director for North Central Area Transit. I currently oversee 3 rural counties in Ohio: Seneca, Crawford, and Huron. I'm here to testify, and I'm here to come to you to testify on amendment of House Bill 54, Workforce Mobility Partnership Program. When I read the Workforce Mobility Partnership Program had been removed from transit, I struggled to understand how can this successful program be removed, completely removed. The House again approved the funding at the same level, $15 million a year for the program for House Bill 54, but the Senate removed it. I can't help but feel guilty that I have failed to educate the Senate on how important this program is. I also feel guilty that I have failed the communities that we serve, especially rural Ohio. The Workforce Mobility Program was created as a pilot program to connect people to their jobs. This was a budget funded at $15 million for flex funds. The program was a huge success as ODOT had more applicants for these funds than funds available, but they spent every money, every penny was allocated. About 50% of the people that ride public transit across Ohio are going to work. They're going to their jobs. This includes people with disabilities who cannot drive. This also includes people who have completed or are trying to complete rehab and treatment centers. And now, without this mobility, without the Workforce Mobility Project Program, we are pulling the rug from underneath them. They are going to go backwards without this funding. Many are trying to mainstream back into society, and we need to make sure that continues. Since the announcement of COVID, lots of expansions in Ohio, national companies like Amazon, Intel, Facebook, Honda have many job openings, but we have to get the people there. While Ohio has capable and skilled workers to fill these new jobs, many have the barrier of transportation. It's preventing them to retain and even applying for the jobs. Workforce Mobility Partnership Program is vital in connecting the dots between the workers and the employees, especially in rural Ohio. The purpose of this program was to fill the gaps in workforce needs to grow and expand businesses in Ohio. The money will be used to address the issues to ensure workers can get their jobs safely and on time. By using public transportation, we can increase the routes, connections, and accessibility. I thank you for your time, your attention to this matter, and allowing me to testify today. On behalf of Rural Transits in Ohio, we appreciate the state's ongoing financial support for public transportation. We look forward to the legislature to show you how many changes we can make as long as we have the proper funding behind us.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions of the witness, Senator Reinke?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Habig. Appreciate the job you do, Seneca County. Could you maybe, I think there's some confusion as to the 50% split that goes through the general fund. It seems that it's changed since a year ago. Could you explain that, or could you get that information that would help us better understand?
Yes, it was $15 million. We wanted it 7.5 to be federal GRF funds. That helps the rural communities tremendously. However, with the $15 million, even if it is federal flex, we will make a way to be able to access those funds.
Follow-up. Could you go into more depth? I mean, to say that you're going to use it, I'm not sure we understand how the 7.5, why it needs to come from the general fund if they're getting it from the federal government, and why it has to come from there versus the federal. Does that make sense? Or?
Yes, Bill, Senator Reineke. We need the $15 million. I mean, we could use a lot more, but when we get the GRF, that helps the rural transit systems because we could use that as our local money, and we could use it to be more creative. With the federal flex funds, yeah, we could use the federal dollars. I mean, I want to make sure we get at least to 15 million. I don't care if it's flex or if it's GRF, but the GRF is so important, more so for the rurals, because we have to have local match to pull down federal funds. But even if it's 15% federal flex funds, we will make a way to use this with our local money. But if we had the GRF, that would be amazing for all the rural communities in Ohio.
Follow-up, sir.
So are you using the GRF as a matching fund?
That is correct. And it makes it more for us to be more creative without the guidelines or the strict federal.
Senator Chavez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you said with if you did not have GRF, you would still make it work. My understanding is that you could not make it work because of the restrictions on the federal money.
We would have to have our own local match, which is our job and family service contracts, school contracts, whatever contracts we can get. We can use those local monies as our match. But the GRF could replace some of that local match.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms.
Thank
Habig,
you.
for your testimony today. I'll direct the members to your iPads. We have a handful of 5 written testimonies that we'd like to make sure you guys review. Is there anybody else here that's willing to testify on substitute House Bill 54? Seeing this concludes the 8th hearing on House Bill 54. Without further business, the committee stands adjourned.